Good morning and welcome to the November 3rd, 2017 meeting of the DNA Subcommittee. I'm Dwight Adams. Also present are Drs. Eastman, Beaver, Kidd, and Sozer. Therefore, we have a quorum. You've all received the draft agenda for today's meeting. The draft date of the most current agenda is found at the bottom of the page, and it's November 1st, 2017. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion.
Dr. Sozer, seconded by Dr. Eastman. All in favor with the uplifted hand? It's unanimous. You've also received a draft copy of the minutes from the August 11, 2017 meeting, which appears on pages 3 and 4 of your binders. Are there any questions or comments regarding those draft minutes?
I didn't see anything.
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Dr. Eastman? Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Kidd? All in favor? Uplifted hand, please. It's again unanimous. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the accreditation and laboratory updates. No votes are required for this today, but you obviously can tell by the thickness of the binder that you received. We have a number of them to go over. There are several QAS audits, off-site reviews, as well as preliminary report on assessment. And we'll begin with Erie County. Erie County had a external QAS audit this past September, and the associated documents there in your binder start at page number 5. We have representatives of the lab, I believe, available by telephone if there are any questions or comments.
I have some questions.
Hello?
Tom, this is Kathy Levine from the DNA Subcommittee meeting.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, you're on speakerphone with the DNA Subcommittee. They have some
Okay.
questions for you. Thank you. Hi, Tom. This is Allison Eastman.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? I understand you're the new technical leader in the lab. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you started in September?
October.
This month? Or, oh no, this is November, I guess. Last month? Okay, so, I mean, there are a lot of findings, and some of them are, I guess the one question about QCing your Plexer kit while running casework, and are these just things that were just, that you did you realize this was going on before you had your QAS audit, or is this, were you still in the, I mean, you're still in the process of reviewing all the SOPs and the quality assurance documents and proficiency tests and all that as a new technical leader, is that correct?
Correct, I am still getting up to speed.
Okay, so do you think that this is just because of the transition period that, like, these proficiency tests were, documents were overlooked and
Yes, the way our lab handles the proficiency tests, our CTS sends an email to the lab director, who then notifies the quality manager, who then notifies the technical leader. Our old lab director was also our technical leader. He has retired, and our old quality manager has since resigned. So he never notified the old quality manager. They both no longer work here, so that kind of fell through the cracks in the transitioning with the new staff.
And what about the QCing of the Plexar kit? I mean, and it says here that there was absolutely no QC documentation maintained in the lab. Were you aware of that before the lab director left?
No, I wasn't aware of that. And then they brought this to my attention, and now we are QCing the Plexor kit before we employ it in casework.
Okay, so you're still in transition, you're still reviewing all of the SOPs and everything like that. I mean, it's a lot of stuff you have to review. So I guess I just, it's just a little kind of alarming seeing this when, but I can understand because of this transition going on right now, I guess. So now you're doing the Plexar kits separately. What about all your other kits? What about the STR kits?
Those do get QC before casework. There's a folder. We've been doing that for as long as I can remember.
Okay. The other thing I was curious is these forms that you provided that have the explanation of where is it? The Erie County Services Forensic Laboratory Quality Report. This is not a corrective action, is it? It's just a review of the issue.
Do you want to mention the page
Page
number?
67,
Oh,
is
okay.
it 67?
Well, here's an example is on page 67.
So it's a quality report, right? It's not a corrective action.
Okay, so you didn't feel that any of these issues rose to the level of initiating a corrective action?
No, I thought once the new staff gets settled, I review everything and get up to speed that, you know, these issues are going to be alleviated.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had.
I had a couple. We can stay on page 67 if you want to. It says that describe the quality issue, use additional paper if necessary, attach any relevant records. And the quality issue was that several of the commercially purchased reagents within the DNA biology section didn't have expiration dates. What does several mean? I know you didn't write that. It's part of the assessment.
I believe it was two or three.
Do you know what they were?
I do not know what they were off the top of my head. They weren't used on a regular basis. I know that.
Yeah, it says that
Yeah.
they weren't currently used within the DNA biology section.
But
Correct.
actually, can I chime in here?
Yeah,
I forgot
sure.
about this one. But then it says they're not currently used within the DNA biology section of the lab, and therefore the lack of expiration date had no impact on reported results. But were they ever used? Were they residual reagents that have been sitting around that might have been used and somebody forgot to do something with them?
Right. They were used in old methodology that's no longer used at the lab. And, they should have been discarded. They weren't, and they expired.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Other comments for Erie County?
Now, the only other thing I was going to say on page 76 is this part of, it's part of the quality report. And it talks about the quality PCR3 quality control procedures, and then the Plexor HY kits. And it says, maybe it says this someplace else, but I just thought if you had an issue with not QCing them before you were running them on samples, I just would suggest maybe you might want to put that in here, because it says it's going to be quality checked, and you might just want to say before processing casework, unless it's somewhere else.
It might be somewhere else, but I agree that is a good place to put it as well.
Okay.
Other comments, questions?
I didn't follow why a proficiency, something was tested, but then it wasn't reported. Is that on the proficiency
I'm not
test?
sure what you're referring to.
They weren't submitted. So I'm looking at page 57.
He doesn't have page numbers.
Oh, I'm
but,
sorry.
That's okay. Just for our purposes, maybe we can just further identify that document.
Sure. So it looks like it's Appendix A, finding and responses. And it's the objective proof for the finding for standard 13.1.9.A. Oh, it's your page 53. Thank you.
Okay.
It said, since the results were not submitted and the test was not graded, the technical leader was not informed of the results. So the test was run, but it didn't get submitted?
Well, that's when, no, all the tests got submitted to CTS. I think she's referring to the technical leader or the lab director didn't inform the quality manager, who didn't inform me, who is now the technical leader.
So the results were not submitted.
Yeah, it says not submitted and the test not graded.
Well, I wasn't able to go through them and give them a pass-fail, but all of our proficiency tests were submitted to CTS.
Okay, so they weren't submitted to you.
Right.
Okay.
Why would the test not be graded?
I think that he means he grades them, not graded by CTS. Is that right?
Yes.
So an incorrect result came back from CTS, but he didn't
There
see
was
it.
a box, there was a stutter peak, yes, and because they were never forwarded through the chain of command, I was never informed of it, so I couldn't look at it and grade it.
So that,
This is Fred Bieber speaking. When you do these so-called proficiency tests, do you handle them in the best way possible or as close as possible to the way you'd handle real casework, so that could avoid some of these problems if every case gets a technical review and an administrative review in the same fashion that a crime scene case would go through the system, and then you wouldn't have these hiccups.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I would recommend that you consider doing that straight away. That's how hospitals do CAP tests and so on. We assign them to technologists, and they go through the sign-out process in the same way a patient sample would. Then you identify issues in the normal fashion. And then if you have mistakes or hiccups in the grading process by CAP or any other agency that grades the submission, then that is something the whole lab can address. Why did this sample get through the lab with an incorrect result? Was it a failure at the bench? Was it in the technical review? Was it in the administrative review? And so on.
So this case just was reported without a technical review?
No, all cases do their technical review.
Oh,
by a second qualified analyst or by the technical leader?
By a second qualified analyst.
so the stutter wasn't caught in the technical review?
No, the issue here was the suspect known profile in the CTS case was excluded from the case for the unknown profile. So, no, when we compared them, we noticed that the known profile was excluded, and these stutter peaks, because we didn't know who that unknown person is, they were not noticed as stutter.
So can I ask you a question about that? What are your criteria for unclicking stutter peaks, labeled stutter? Because if this was a real case, would you have known that those are true stutter peaks, or could they have been a low-level contributor overlapping stutter, pushing it up to be labeled?
Well, if this was a real case, and a known sample came in that matched this unknown person, we would have analyzed this profile in StarMix. And StarMix would have either one, flagged us that these peaks don't make sense into the profile, or StarMix would have recognized them as elevated stutter and still produced the correct result.
But this was a manual interpretation, correct?
A manual exclusion.
Okay, but so why would you click off those stutter peaks if you don't know for sure that they're, I mean, how would you know for sure that they're stutter?
You wouldn't know until you got a known in that matched this unknown male and analyzed it through StarMix and took a look at the profile after the StarMix analyzation.
So it's a single source profile, and there are 4 alleles at one location. Is that what?
No, it was the epithelial fraction,
that's
and
right.
It was a mixture of the victim and an unknown male.
But it could be a very low-level third contributor or something like that, if this was a real case.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If this was a real case, it could be a third contributor, and they're at very low level.
It could have been, and once you analyze it in StarMix, looking at the diagnostics and the StarMix results, you could make a further interpretation.
Okay, so do you still do manual interpretations, or is everything StarMix now?
Everything's exclusions we don't run through StarMix, but anything that is an inclusion we run through StarMix.
Okay. So I guess it was evidence that had multiple peaks, and you don't know what it is. Okay.
I guess one more question. If you did not know the test results, the consensus results from CTS, would you have clicked off those stutter peaks?
No, we wouldn't have.
So it's kind of not being treated like a real case.
It's kind of what?
It's kind of not being treated as a real case.
It would be really interesting to see what this is all blacked out, so we can't see what it is. But it's a piece of evidence in their stutter. You don't know what it is. It's, I don't know. Like it's just all black. I can't tell what's going on.
We have some proficiency test results here, but everything's blacked out.
See, the way StarMix works is it's not just simply yes, it's a peak, or no, it's not, or yes, it's a stutter peak. No, it's not a stutter peak. It gives percentages of the average stutter peak, and then it has variances. So it could be an elevated stutter peak, and StarMix would consider 2 factors. Either it's a real peak and give it a weight, or a stutter peak and give it a weight.
So that's the way you do it now. But the way with a manual review, possibly maybe those stutter peaks should not be clicked off because you don't know that. You can't do what your probabilistic genotyping does.
Exactly.
Okay.
Anything else for Erie County? Let's move on to Monroe County. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monroe County, the ANAB conducted an off-site review this past August, and the documents start at page 90 in your binder. And I think they're available by phone if needed. There were no findings.
This new document.
Okay, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Does this have to do with the quality assurance audit?
This
or
is
is
698.
this
We'll
something
come to that.
Oh, okay, that's
at the,
later. All right.
Findings later. Okay, nothing from Monroe County. Moving on to the New York State Police. A2LA conducted an external QAS audit of the casework section this past June. Those documents begin at page 197 in your binder. And I think members of the lab are here. Any questions, comments?
What was the amendment? That was.
Yeah, what's that?
Morning. Morning.
Hi.
Tom Leach, I'm the Associate Director of Department.
On page 1, it says that the document was amended.
Yeah, so in the process, I think in both, so you should have both database and casework.
Yes.
And in both of those cases, what happens is ATLA will send us the audit document for review. And in both cases, when we reviewed it, we identified that they needed to correct some things in regards to, in some of the cases, I think it had to do with typos that maybe they had. They also had put, what's required is that they need to, for anything they put an NA for, they need to make a comment and explain why it's an NA, and there were some of those were missing. We need to just clarify in some of the appendices, it talks about who had an external review. So we just need to clarify there too. They had indicated some, I think they were mainly typo on the dates.
Mm-hmm.
So in those correspondence, they then amend that and send us the amended one.
Okay.
That is the final copy that will then go to the FBI.
As was mentioned, there was an audit of both the casework as well as the database lab. The database lab starts at page 311. Other questions for the New York State Police?
I don't have any.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences. ANAP conducted an off-site review this past August. Those findings begin at page 446, and I believe we have representatives available by phone if needed. By the way, there were no findings.
No findings.
No questions.
Okay. Moving on to Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. ANAP conducted a full assessment this past August, and those findings are in your binders starting at page 453. And there were additional materials provided to you beginning on page 587.1, and that would be the blue page numbers.
Those are things that are not actually in the binder. So the free documents that you received, you can look through those and they'll have a blue page number on the bottom. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you about your new mixture. So we just got the document that you're doing your revising and revisiting your mixture interpretation. So I didn't get a chance to read it. So could you explain what you're doing?
What the original finding was based on, we had established what we call mixture interpretation threshold. We had seen issues during our validation with imbalance between the stochastic threshold and this mixture threshold, which was that the stochastic threshold was 500 RFUs, the mixture threshold was 1,000 RFUs. And due to the imbalance, we had seen issues during our mixture studies that mixtures were not being interpreted correctly. So that's why we established this threshold. The assessors saw it otherwise. They felt that we should go with the stochastic threshold. We appealed, and the appeal was turned down. So what we are doing is we're saying that the mixture threshold is a cautionary threshold, that if there's peaks below the mixture threshold, that the profile should be interpreted with caution, and we've set new rules in place to allow us to interpret profiles that fall within this range.
So you still have you have a stochastic threshold.
Yes.
You have your analytical threshold, and then you still have this mixture threshold that you're still maintaining, or is that your
It's no longer
new
a
and
hard and
improved
fast.
stochastic threshold?
it's no longer a hard and fast threshold like it was before. We are now allowing the analysts to interpret peaks or interpret profiles that are below this threshold, but we have rules in place to ensure that misinterpretations don't occur, like what we had seen during the validation.
And for your stochastic threshold, do you take an average and 3 standard deviations, or how do you?
We did 2 methods. We did average and 3 standard deviations, and looked at our validation study. We still saw a lot of dropout if we did that. That was at 400 RFUs. So we took the second method, the highest false homozygous that was called, with all the low sensitivity studies that we did, and we chose that to be 500 RFUs.
Okay. All right.
You were only having these troubles with very low levels of DNA?
Yes, this was mainly in the 125 kilograms.
Picogram, yeah. What are your criteria for exclusion?
You would,
in
if
a
we
mixture?
could separate out a major and minor, then we would treat it as a single source profile after the separation and compare it to the known profile. If they have peaks that are below the stochastic threshold, then we would assume that something had dropped out. We would still consider it a probable match, depending on if those peaks are below stochastic threshold. If they're above the stochastic threshold, then they will be excluded.
Have you done any validation with 3-person mixtures?
Yes, we did.
And how do you handle exclusions there in 3-person or 4-person mixtures from a firearm swab, for example?
We limit ours to up to 3 persons. Anything higher than a 3-person mixture would calling inconclusive. For 3-person mixtures, if there's 1 major and 2 minors, we'll do separation and have the 1 major profile as a single source profile and compare it to the known suspect. The minor would most likely be inconclusive.
Do you think you can separate major and minor with 3-person mixtures, low-level 3-person with stacking?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not. We will have to reach that mixture threshold in order to do it.
So how are you testing your new mixture SOP?
We placed rules that under this 1,000 RFUs, because we saw imbalance and peaks were not dropping out, it could go down to 20%. So we're going to consider anything with 20% or above peak ratios to be a possible genotype pair. We also extended it to mixture ratios. Right now, above 1,000 RFUs must have at least 1 to 2 mixture ratio in order to separate. We're extending that to a 1 to 4 below this range.
Are you going to do some spiked mixtures or something and test analysts and see if they properly interpret using your new interpretation guidelines?
We probably might, but a lot of these mixtures have been interpreted before. I took a lot of these from our validation study at this level and tested it using the current guidelines before we put this kit into effect. And the problem was analysts was making the wrong calls with the original mixture thresholds. That's why we placed this threshold on, because if not, using our current guidelines, we would have called incorrect major minors. Right now, with these new guidelines, when they come out, the same mixtures were looked at the validation, that we did for the validation study, and using these guidelines, we'll get the correct major minors.
And you'll make sure by testing everybody on the new interpretation guidelines, and make sure that everybody's on board with the new guidelines.
Yes. We've been having a lot of meetings, just going over
That
3 hours meetings every week.
Have you needed to go back to look at any casework that was previously signed out and where the issues went to trial or plea bargains to look at old cases?
These cases haven't, the cases only were from April of this year.
Okay.
Now. That's when we went online with the kit.
Mm-hmm.
We evaluated every case that we analyzed with the new kit. There were 29 cases identified where this issue had come up, and we are going to go back and reevaluate those profiles with the new
Reports have been
procedures.
issued on those 29 cases?
Yes.
Have you informed the customers?
Yes, we have.
Okay. What have you told them?
We told them basically what we told you about the issue, about the fact that we're now going to be going back and reevaluating them, and we gave them a list of cases that were affected.
How long will that take?
It's a guess right now, but I would imagine we should be able to get it done within a month or so when we go online with the procedure. and that will be in about a week and a half.
Would it be good to have a report on that at the next meeting?
I would favor that.
You'll let us know the results of that
Sure.
at our next meeting. That would be an old business item. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Westchester County. The laboratory conducted an internal QAS this past September. Documents begin on page 588. In addition, you have some blue numbered material that is beginning at 686.1.
Could I just go back, I'm sorry, for a minute? On page 455.
Are we back with Suffolk County?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
I
okay.
couldn't read this printout.
I had the same issue, and I wanted to point that out too.
Yeah, we
It's
sent
not
you
you
a,
guys.
Oh, we got
we
the,
sent you a new
we
version.
got the new version.
Yeah.
Okay,
We got it electronically, and then
Yeah.
there's a hard
And there's a
copy
printout
here.
in here.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, so what happened is, in putting these binders together, we get PDF documents and we add stamps and footers and things like that.
All
On that
the
particular
constant.
case, apparently all the,
L's and T's were,
well, I think the electronic gobbledygook that recreates
maybe
it got
it was a
just
different
zapped for that little
country.
piece.
I thought it was Russian.
But we use it as an internal quality control check
To
to
see
make
if
sure
we're
that
reading.
subcommittee's given due
Make
diligence.
sure somebody's reading it.
And you've actually passed, so we appreciate that. We do this every now and then. But given the volume of material that you've all read through, it's impressive that on the bottom of one page, I think 2-3 sentences that are unreadable is noted by a number of people. So thank you for that, your due
Actually,
diligence.
it's 3 pages. Thank
Show
you,
off.
Brian. Next, Westchester County, beginning on page 588. Internal QAS audit.
Okay, so this is
One
this
finding.
is separate. This is later. Right?
That's later.
Okay. Are they on the phone?
They're on the phone if we need them. Do we need them?
I don't think so.
I only have one run.
Yeah.
It doesn't say one, it says A, and I assume that's one.
Would you like me to call?
Oh, yeah. Let's be sure. Over here.
What page are you?
It was page
Hello.
79.
I'm
Six,
looking
seven,
for Bob
nine.
Adamo. Or is this Elaine?
Hello.
This is Kathy Levine.
Hi, Kathy. It's Elaine Schwartz.
Hi. We have a question from the DNA subcommittee. We have you on speakerphone.
Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Hi, this is Allison. I just, on your one finding on your internal.
Allison, we're just having some problems with the phone. You could just hold on 1 minute.
Okay.
Maybe if I. Yes. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
On your finding, it was just one run that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. It was just one run.
And how did that happen?
What happened was the technician and the analyst that set up the run decided to put on a positive control and a ladder from a new global filer kit that had just come in, and to try to QC that kit. They put it on the run with casework samples. The casework samples were amplified with a kit that had already been QC'd, and also other controls that had already been QC'd and ladders that had been QC'd. With the intention, the way they set up the run was that with the intention that whoever processed the run would process it in two different projects. One project just having the new kit QC reagents, and the second project having the casework reagents. But it didn't happen like that.
So it averaged all the ladders together?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh. So it was fine though when you reanalyzed it with, the proper ladders?
Yes, it was.
Fine?
It was fine. The profiles did not change.
Okay. I have another question, just because you added all this extra stuff that I could read.
Yeah.
About, I'm not sure what this came out of. This is
Can you,
686.3.
we're getting a very low
Okay.
signal here. Can you maybe turn up your microphone, maybe?
I'm looking at, I'm not sure what this is. I guess it's a quality assurance procedure, and it says do not process with 20% filter for your Y filer and for your global filer. Do you use a 20% filter on your casework?
No, that's for the known samples only.
Okay. So you use your validated stutter or?
Yes,
okay.
Our own validated starter filters, which are much lower than 20%.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay, thank you, Bob and Elaine.
Next up is Nassau County. That laboratory had an off-site surveillance completed in October, and there were no findings. Any comments?
And that was in this new stack, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that was recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Page
Because,
707.
Essentially, our process for OFS is that the binders go out at a set time. Anything that comes out after they're assembled comes in additional documents. You get electronically hard copies at the meeting, and the page numbers are different and dated, just so you can track it. But
Okay, we're through with the accreditation and laboratory updates. We'll now move into old business. The first item on that agenda is the partial match update. Brian?
Sure. So essentially, there's no change from the last meeting of the subcommittee in August, but just for completeness, I'll kind of release the numbers that we did last time around. So in total, 92 names were requested. In 44 cases, evaluation could not confirm it, meaning it didn't meet the statistical thresholds. The total names were released for 48. There are none that are pending statistical evaluation. Of the 48, 46 were closed by other means. 2 remain active. In 3 cases, a relative was identified. 2 of those led to an arrest, and 2 of those led to a conviction. So this is the same as we had last time, but that's essentially a recap of the same numbers.
This is since the inception of the
Correct,
program.
since 2009.
Could you repeat again, starting with 46 closed, 2 active?
Sure. So there's 46 closed, 2 cases remain active. In 3 cases, the relative was identified. In 2 of those cases, led to an arrest, and in 2 of those cases, it led to conviction. The one that was off from there, it's not reported here, but it turned out that someone that could have had common access, it was a burglary case. There was a cigarette butt found inside the burglary, but it turned out that the relative that was identified successfully had access to the building, and they thought the sample could have been tracked in as a transfer. So it did identify the relative, but it didn't lead to arrest or conviction. There was no further follow-up.
On the 2 convictions, what were they convicted of?
So the first conviction had to do with a burglary case, and on the second case, it was a double homicide.
And but not for this partial match protocol. That double homicide might not yet have been solved.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about that case?
I think so. It's a closed case. So it's a Suffolk County case, and again, Suffolk County can chime in if they want. But essentially, there's 2 homicide cases from the 90s. There were 2 prostitutes that were raped, beaten, and left naked in the woods out in Suffolk County. The laboratory noticed a potential partial match for a sample that was inputted in the data bank. When they noticed that partial match, they instituted the procedure to statistically evaluate that sample. It went through that statistical process, and Joe and Irene, feel free to correct me if I misspeak on anything. Once it went through all those processes, past the statistical threshold, the name was released to the Suffolk County Police Department of the potential relative, in this case, Tim Bitroff, who was going through the process. The police performed their investigation, their due diligence. During that process, I believe they got an abandonment sample from a brother of Timothy Bitroff, and that sample actually matched the offender profile from the 2 rape homicide cases, and then ultimately it went to trial and resulted in a conviction in September of this year. And I believe it was 50 to 100 years or something like that. I think. And again, you would know more about that.
The relative was a parent, child, or sib?
Sibling.
Sib.
Yes, brother.
Brother, you said that.
Now estranged brother.
Anything else on partial match? If not, we'll move on to familial search. On October 18th of this year, the state registry published a notice of adoption of the regulations that allow familial searching in the state of New York. A copy of that notice of adoption appears in your binder starting at page 688. Let me just say that I want to thank each of the subcommittee members as well as the staff of the Office of Forensic Services for the effort that was put in crafting that policy document and getting it to this point. You should be congratulated. Anything else that needs to be said about familial search?
So have there been any?
Yeah, are the
Request.
DAs lining up cases?
So currently right now on the DCGS website, if you go there is an overview of the entire process as well as an electronic application to submit. That's available. Notice was provided to all the law enforcement agencies within the state of New York and the district attorney's offices. To date, no applications have been submitted, but I know there's been many conversations. I think people are assembling their case materials. So I would not assume that because there was no application submitted since the 18th, that we will get none and nothing will happen. I think people are just trying to be very diligent about the cases they select to move forward with this process. There's some fairly robust controls on the type of cases, so people are just trying to make sure they put them in and they're the right ones.
Are you getting contacts from other states?
Not yet. I have not.
About this notice?
I have not.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a picky little silly question out of curiosity. Like on page 690, Gina, there are like 4 stars that are listed. What do the 4 stars mean?
Whereabouts? Oh yeah, comment 3.
Yeah,
in the
they're
right-hand column.
They're like ellipses, so language was left out right here. Is this what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just language was left out.
Oh, okay.
Anything else? Let's move on to the BioTwig update. If you'll recall at our last meeting, Dr. Kidd asked for an update from the BioTwig related to massively parallel sequencing. We got a document on page 692, and I believe if you have any questions, we have a representative here from the BioTwig.
My question is simple, and that is, there is only one lab now that appears to be evaluating massively parallel sequencing.
Joe Galdi is the chair of the BioTwig.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That was that. Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
That actually helped.
I wouldn't take that as a disinterest in the technology, but just understanding that many of the labs are coming online now with new kits. StarMix is coming online in a lot of different laboratories. Even laboratories that were previously approved for StarMix, if they move to new kits, now have to revalidate StarMix with those new kits. So I think it's not that there's not an interest. I think it's just a matter of there's lots of things that are currently happening that labs have deadlines to meet.
My interest is the fact that we're working on microhaplotypes that are being done with massively parallel sequencing, and their ability to resolve mixtures is vastly greater than the use of the STRs.
Mm-hmm. I think I would just change it around right now and say that instead of just one is working on it, I'd say 12.5% of the labs are already taking the first steps, despite all the other things that they're doing within New York State to try and advance it. That's just my little flipping of the numbers.
And I have a clear personal interest.
Sure.
Well, it looks like state police has it as a budget line item, so there's an interest there too, so at least two.
I have one question relating to sequencing. What is happening in New York State outside of the OCME when you need to do mitochondrial DNA testing? What happens around the state? Maybe Joe can answer.
I can only speak for our laboratory, but we either send it, depending on the type of case. If it's a forensic case, there's a private lab with a DOH license that we would send it to. If it's body identification, we have in the past utilized OCME when they had grants available for that, or we send to the University of North Texas.
UNT.
Yeah. So UNT was one that also was available. New York OCME is available for missing person cases, and UNT had a grant. They lost the grant, then they got the grant back. So there are avenues available.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to lab disclosures. We'll begin with Monroe County. The documents are in your binder, beginning on page 698. That would be the blue numbered additional material.
Yeah, all of these came in after the binders were assembled, so I apologize for that timing thing.
This is an amended report issued in Monroe County. Any comments? Customer was informed, corrective action underway. Okay, all right. Next up, the OCME. That begins on page 701. Blue numbers again. Related more to the mortuary unit issue, leading to an incorrect entry.
I just had a question if this was contamination or a sample switch at collection.
Contamination during the mortuary autopsy examination. Sure. My name is Louis Barnes. I'm the QA director for the agency. And the issue is a contamination that occurred while the DNA swab was collected during an autopsy examination in the mortuary.
So, a sample was collected from a hand of a decedent.
Correct.
And it really had the profile of another person, another decedent that was being autopsied at the same time.
Correct.
Are you sure it wasn't a sample switch where they just collected a sample from the wrong body?
Swabs were not collected for that other decedent.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is that you have two people here. Somebody goes in to collect a sample, and they collect from this person versus this person. Like you think it's this person, it's labeled with this person's name, but you really collected it from this person.
So It's still ongoing, we're investigating
Yeah.
the possibility also, but right now we're certain that it occurred in the mortuary.
Right, I agree. I almost feel like it was a miscollection.
Yeah, well, I think this is
know.
a very early notification, so they still have to
Yeah.
go through, and it might be that, obviously if you're taking swabs of a hand, there might be an epithelial fraction from the person that you took it from as well as the sample that's on top. So I think there's going to be other mechanisms that they can
Was
resolve.
it a mixed profile that you got? I just want to make sure that you're not like doing this for the lab when it's really not a lab issue, that it's a morgue issue.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
certain that it's not a laboratory issue,
Yeah.
it occurred in the mortuary. So that's why we're reviewing the mortuary workflows.
Normally, this wouldn't be something that appears before the subcommittee
Okay,
or the
I'll
commission.
just-
What happened is New York City has a root cause analysis law that's different than the rest of the state, and as such, they're obligated to notify us. But this is not something you would normally see. So if crime scene had a contamination event or the medical examiner anywhere else in the state, that would not be coming to this level. It's just because of this different level of reporting requirement that they
Okay.
have. So it's not a lab issue
I
at
just
all.
wanted to be careful if it's not a
Yeah.
contamination is when you have a sample from one going somewhere else, but sometimes I just didn't know if I would maybe not classify it as a contamination, but more of a sample switch.
Okay.
I just have a question. I'd like to be educated. What's the rationale for swabbing a hand that could have primary or secondary transfer from other objects? Why not a buccal swab on the decedents?
The swab was taken as evidence, not as a
Oh.
exemplar. So it was a homicide. So they were trying to collect whatever evidence they could off the body.
Gotcha.
What is it, a mixed profile?
I believe that it was. I can't say 100% because I haven't really been involved too much in investigation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the New York State Police. In your binders, blue number 703. This was related to lost evidence. Lost evidence within a hood.
I'm Julie Pizzichetti. I'm the Director of the Biological Science Section. Do you want a brief summary of the information we have at this point? Okay, we've had an increased request to swab drug packaging for DNA analysis, but we also have significant safety concerns because of all fentanyl and carfentanil that we see coming to the laboratory. So all the drug packaging goes to our drug chemistry section first. And in this particular case, there was an item 2 that contained 3 baggies, each of which had drug material in it. So the drug chemistry section took one of the baggies, which had been twisted into almost like a dumbbell shape, and cut off a portion of it and took the drug material out and then made the packaging a sub-item and brought it back to evidence receiving. One of our forensic scientists went to evidence receiving, took out that packaging, which was now in 2 pieces. There was a portion with the twisted end and then a very small piece of plastic. And we now require our analysts, for their own safety, because there can be residue on this packaging, to look under the hood. So when the forensic scientists took the larger piece and the smaller piece and laid it out on the bench paper after decontaminating the hood, the small little tiny piece of the plastic flew up the hood. The remaining piece was still there. She swabbed that piece. There was also a plastic bag from a separate drug packaging, that was item 1, that she swabbed, and there was also a gun in the case in which we got swabbed. So of that item 2, which consisted of 3 plastic bags, it's less than 1/6 of it was actually lost, because of the one bag that was separated, the twisted portion on the other side were still present. It was the one tiny little piece of plastic that went up the hood. So what we've done since then is had our engineering section install like mesh at the back of the hood. So in case something gets sucked up the hood, it's stopped right there. There was an attempt to locate that tiny piece of plastic, but it's probably somewhere in the duct system. We actually did have the lieutenant overseeing our engineering section walk around the roof of the lab trying to locate it. We were not able to locate it. So
Is
It
this
wasn't
a fume hood? A fume hood
Yeah,
or a
it was
bio hood?
a fume hood.
100% exhaust, right?
Yeah. What about using a bio hood instead and designating it as the drug hood or something?
Well, we actually are doing training right now in the room that has the biohoods in it, so we're trying to keep things separate. So at this point, we're having the analysts. We were just instituting that and putting procedures in place because of the safety concerns. So now that this one incident's happened, we have that mesh put in to prevent it from happening again. So within the other items in the case, we were able to get a John Doe DNA profile. The report was actually completed last week. And the agency, excuse me, has already been notified, both the agency and the district attorney's office has been notified by Russ Gettig, our technical leader, about the loss of that little piece of plastic. And they were also advised that within that item 2, there are 2 more plastic bags that we could swab if they requested. They did not request that because they actually have an evidence profile suitable for comparison from the other bag and from the weapon in the case. So their focus was to get a control sample for comparison.
I think you answered my next question. You getting some DNA off these swabs of the bags?
Not in every case. In this
Yeah.
particular case, we did. Yes,
Yeah.
it really, you just can't predict it. Sometimes we get nothing. Sometimes we get complex mixtures. Sometimes we do get a profile suitable for comparison.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last disclosure is Westchester County. Notification of non-conformance related to the validation of a new instrument.
Page 705.
That begins on 705. It is 705, blue numbers. Any questions or comments?
How many cases are involved? We'll
make a call.
Oh. I think we should do. Oh, here we are.
Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Kathy Levine from the DNA Subcommittee. Is that Bob Adamo and Elaine Schwartz?
Yes.
Okay, they have some questions for
Okay,
you.
so what we did was we did an evaluation of all the cases that we had written and approved since the incident happened. We were able to identify 25 cases where 42 samples had to be reprocessed. Of those 25 cases, only 6 will need amended reports. We also checked any testimonies that we might have done. We didn't do any trial testimonies on any cases that would have been affected. We did 6 grand juries cases. We went back and looked at all those cases. Only 1 requires an amended report. And we also looked at any Rosario or disclosure packages we gave out. There were 16 of those, and only 2 required amended reports.
What needed to be amended?
Elaine?
What needed to be amended is on some of the profiles, the stats change.
Is this new instrument the only instrument you're using?
This whole issue isn't about an instrument. It's about the software, the Gene Mapper IDX software that we use to process our runs. One of the settings got changed inadvertently in January of this year. So we had validated, the setting is called smoothing, and we had done our global filer internal validation with the setting on light smoothing, and it had got changed in January to what the smoothing setting is called none.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Are you using more than one instrument?
Yes, we have two 3500 CE units.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the software. The software is separate from the instrument.
So you have separate workstations that you run your GMID-X on?
Yes, I'm going to have Alana Loriano explain that, how it's set up.
But
we do have separate computers with GMAP or IDX loaded on it to analyze our samples. However, the software itself is one software with the analysis settings that can be applied to all the different computers. And this allows all the analysts to go to a particular workstation, and we have a number of them, and they can analyze a run on one workstation and continue working on that run on another workstation because the analysis parameters are the same across all workstations.
So I assume when you that the peak heights were a little bit higher when you had no smoothing, right? So
correct.
That's correct.
So you had to. So your stats might be a little less
correct.
Rare.
Correct. In the case, some of the cases we've looked at, the conclusions aren't changing. The statistics are changing for the most part, and they're dropping because maybe one or two alleles may fall below the threshold. Because of the peak height difference between smoothing and non-smoothing.
So was there any significant change or,
the most that we're seeing, and it's not all the samples that have very high peaks, it doesn't affect it at all. It's samples that have peaks close to the analytical threshold. When we use light smoothing, maybe one or two peaks fall below the analytical threshold. And then also samples that have peaks around the stochastic threshold. If we apply the light smoothing, some of those loci may have peaks that drop below the stochastic, and then we can't use that locus for stats. So in the samples that it does affect, there's one or two alleles that are causing the difference.
So did any of them result in what was a strong association ending up being a weak or no association?
No, we haven't actually. We've just been reprocessing samples since this happened. We've only written 2 reports, and those 2 reports went to trial. So we haven't had a chance to fully interpret the reprocessed samples yet.
Okay.
Good.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Westchester.
Thank I should have said maybe we need a report on that next meeting.
Yeah,
too.
I think it would be good.
Yep. We'll take care of that.
The next item on the agenda is the executive session. And I have a motion that we go into executive session to discuss matters relating to current investigation or matters leading to appointments, promotions, demotions, discipline, or suspension of a particular person.
I make a motion.
Dr. Sozer, do I have a second? Dr. Eastman, all in favor with the uplifted hand? It's approved. At this point, if you're not a member of the DNA subcommittee or staff, I would like to have you leave the room, please.
Sorry, my bad. I don't care if it's not on the bridge as long as we record it. It would be great if it's on the bridge, but if not, I undid them. They're both on.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to go back on the record. No actions were taken in executive session. The next meeting will be February 9th, 2018, unless there is a subsequent announcement. But for now, February 9th, 2018, here in New York City. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?